Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate. I put out sewing content every new week, so you may need to consider subscribing if you have not done that yet. So it's absolutely free to do that. And I also want to say thank you to all my subscribers. You guys are the real deal. Thank you so much for liking my videos, for commenting, for sharing them. In this video, I'll be sharing with you how to pad your hip and butt, guys. The most interesting part is that this is my first attempt at hip and butt padding, which means you too can make yours after watching this video. So without talking too much, let's get right into it. So the first thing we need to do is to draft a basic skirt pattern with no extra allowance on it, which means I'll be marking my round measurement divided by 4 with no extra allowance on it. So I marked my hip measurement, which is 40 divided by 4, which gave me 10 inches. So I'll be taking away 1.5 inches from my waistband before I mark my hip point, which is 9 inches. So depending on how many inches you want your band to be, take note of that before you mark your measurements. So I marked my full length, which is 17.5, and my sewing allowance. So I also marked my zip allowance on the back pattern. So add your zip allowance, and that should be the only allowance you add, which is at the back pattern. Now moving on, I'll be working on the front piece first. So from the waist point, I'll go down by 1 inch and I'll mark that point. Then on the hip line, I'm going to go in by 5 inches. So just watch what I'm doing and you see how I am taking these measurements. So I'll mark 5 inches at that point. Then the next thing I'm going to do is from the full length, I'll go up by 2 inches. So from that line, I'm going up by 2 inches. Then I'll connect all the points together. All the points I just made, I will connect all of them together using a curved ruler. So just go ahead and join the 3 points like that. Make sure you avoid sharp edges, because if you have sharp edges, your pads would not look real. So just blend that point if you have any sharp points there. So moving on, I'm going to label that up and then I'll go down and label it down. It's very important to label before you cut so that you do not mix this up. So I'll go ahead and cut this following the marks I just made. So once I'm done with that, I'll move to the back pattern. So I have only my zip allowance added to this pattern. So I'll go ahead now and mark 1 inch. It has to be the same with what you marked on the front pattern. Then from the line, from the zip allowance line, I'm going to go in by 1 inch. I hope you can see what I am doing. Then again from the full length, I'll go up by 2 inches because I took 2 inches at the front pattern. Then there's one more measurement I'll be taking from my waist to my under butt. So I've attached a video so that you understand what I am talking about. So my waist to my under butt is 14 inches. So I'm going to mark that point. Then I would connect all the dots I have, the marks I have made using a curved ruler. So please make sure your marks are, your lines are not sharp. You don't have any sharp edges while creating these lines, because this is going to affect how your parts will come out. So now I'm just trying to blend this down. I'll connect to that underbutt point. Then I would just join it with the full length mark. And that will be all for the back pattern. I'm going to cut it out. So you don't need to be in a hurry while you are cutting this out, because you need this to have that perfect curve. So I'll label this up and down. It's very important to do this. So once I'm done, this is what I have. So I'll be making use of this foam. It depends on how big you want your foam to be. This foam is what I'll be using, though I'll need to double it because I need my foam to be ½ inch. So as you can see, my foam is about ½ inch. So I'll be doubling it to make it ½ inch. So in the process of this video, you understand what I am doing, what I'm talking about. So I'll place all my patterns on this foam and trace it out. So you just need to take your time while you are doing this so that you get the exact pattern transferred on the foam. So I'll place all the patterns and repeat the same process just like I've done for this one. So once you're done with that, you should have 4 pieces of the pads on your table. That's 2 pieces for the front and 2 pieces for the back. And so I went ahead and joined 2 pieces to get one so that I will have ½ inch, as you can see here. So that's what I meant when I said I was going to double my foam. So you should have 4 pieces, like I said, 2 for the back and 2 for the front. Though I would advise, if you want a thicker foam, just make sure you get the exact thickness you want. Now, the next thing we want to do is to make sure we trim the sides of this foam because we need it to look realistic. So you need to watch closely and look at what I'm doing so that you understand. So just pick up a scissors and trim all sides of the foam so that it lays flat and blends into the skin. We do not want our parts looking funny when we attach them to our dresses. So please take your time and don't skip this step. If you do not do this step properly, I assure you, you will not like the outcome of your parts. So once you do that, you should have something that looks like this. So you repeat that for the 4 parts and you should have this. So look closely and you see how I have paired them up. So the next thing we are going to do is to cover our parts with an interfacing. So you can use any interfacing of your choice, but I'll be using this paper stay and I'll place the patterns and cut out 2 pieces I'll cut out 2 pieces for each pattern. So just cut that out and at the end you should have 2 pieces for all the patterns. So once that process is completed, we'll go ahead and iron the interfacing on the foams. So I'm going to place it like that and iron it to the foam neatly. So this process is to make sure we have a neat foam, we have a neat finish. So please make sure you label. In fact, I cannot emphasize how important it is to label your foams. Please make sure you label. If not, you get confused. So if you have a marker, use a marker. I used a pen because I did not have a marker at that time. So just do that, repeat it for all the pieces and front and back. And of course, don't forget to label. So once you're done, this is what we have. You can see our foam is neatly covered and labeled, of course. So we're going to move to the next step now, which is joining the foams together. I'll take these foams to my machine now and I'll sew around them. So once I sew around them, this is to keep my stitch, to keep my interfacing in place.
So the next thing I'll do is to join these foams together. So I'll place one on the other and sew, and this is the result. It's looking really neat and put together. So moving on to the fabric, some changes would be made on the fabric, like the lining being shorter by 1.5 inches, because we don't want our lining showing drawing pulling out when we attach it to the skirt pattern. Then for the hip, I'll be adding half of an inch to the hip point. Only half of an inch. Remember, I told you we are I'm working with a half an inch foam. So this half of an inch will not be added to the lining. Take notes. So the back pattern also, I would add half of an inch to the measurements, but the half of an inch on the hip will not be added to the lining piece. So as you can see, the lining does not have that half of an inch. Then it is also shorter. The lining piece is also shorter by 1.5 inches. Also, don't forget to add 1 inch for your dart intake on the waist, and also 1 inch on all the measurements for sewing allowance. So I'll take this to my machine now and join the darts and then close up the sides. So this is what it's looking like after taking my darts. So just take the fabric to your machine like you would normally do and take in half of an inch sewing allowance for your darts and join the sides. The only part open on this skirt now is the zip area. So I repeated the same process on the lining piece. I joined the darts and I sewed in the darts, and I also joined the sides of the lining, leaving only the zip area open. And now moving on, I'll be attaching my parts, my foam, to the lining piece and not the fabric. Take note of that. Then from the waist point, I'll go down by 1 inch before I place my pad on that point where I joined the sides. Please take note of how I am positioning the pads, the front and the back pads. So I'm going to place that on that line, and so I'll take this to my sewing machine and show you how this is done. So just watch closely and you would understand what I am doing here. You have no reason to rush this part because it is very important. Just sew along that line and attach the parts. Don't forget you are dropping your part 1 inch below the waistline. So once you're done, this is what it should look like with just one line, one seam line. And after doing that, we're going to keep the parts in place by sewing on them. Just take notes of what I'm doing. So I'm going to sew around the parts to keep them in place so that they do not move when we wear them. And take notes, when you sew, make sure you take out your lining so that it does not get into the stitch, because once you do that, you're going to reduce your lining. So once that was done, I attached my 1.5 inch band, then I attached my zip, and then lastly I attached the lining to the fabric as I would normally do. And guys, this is what it's looking like, looking really beautiful. And that's the under of the skirt I talked about, the lining being shorter than the fabric. So if I could achieve this, you too can achieve this. Thank you so much for watching, and if you learned anything new in this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. See you in my next video.